My architectural model, a $3,000 commission, wasn't just moved. It was shoved into the corner. The delicate balsa wood spire snapped clean off. But that wasn't what made me stop breathing. It was the smell of cheap Chardonnay lingering in the air of my minimalist sanctuary. I walked to the bathroom. There it was, my $185 limited edition face serum lying in the trash bin squeezed dry. My phone buzzed on the marble counter. A text from my mother, Angela. Vanessa needed a little pick-me-up for her date. Don't be stingy. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. Most daughters would have called. They would have screamed, demanded an apology, or sent a paragraph-long text about boundaries and respect. I didn't do any of that. I didn't even type a reply. I simply set my phone down on the counter right next to a sticky ring of Chardonnay that had etched itself into the marble. My pulse didn't spike. My hands didn't shake. Instead, a strange, cold clarity washed over me. It was the kind of focus I usually reserved for finalizing blueprints on a multi-million-dollar commercial renovation. I realized in that moment that this wasn't a family relationship anymore. It was a failed business merger where one partner was siphoning assets and the other was footing the bill. I was done negotiating terms. It was time for a liquidation. I walked to the utility closet and retrieved my cleaning supplies. I didn't clean the apartment like someone tidying up after a party. I cleaned it like I was scrubbing a crime scene. I used a razor blade to lift the wine residue from the stone. I polished the glass coffee table until the fingerprints, Vanessa's fingerprints, were gone. I straightened the throw pillows with geometric precision. I was erasing them. With every wipe of the microfiber cloth, I was removing their claim on my space. At 2:00 in the morning, the loft was spotless. The air was sterile. I sat down at my dining table, opened my laptop, and logged into a private real estate portal I used for my high-end clients. I wasn't looking for a home with charm or character. I wasn't looking for a view. I was looking for a fortress. I found it within 20 minutes, a penthouse in a converted industrial warehouse in the Pioneer Square district. It was stark, cold, and expensive. The rent was $3,850 a month, $850 more than I was currently paying, but the amenities list read like a security manifest: private elevator access, 24-hour concierge, and most importantly, biometric entry. No physical keys, no keys to copy at a hardware store, no keys to hand to a sister for a pick-me-up. I didn't hesitate. I didn't worry about the credit check or the lease terms. I transferred the funds for the deposit immediately. I signed the digital lease with a single click. The screen flashed a confirmation. Welcome home, Olivia. It felt less like a greeting and more like a contract for asylum. Next, I opened a new tab. I didn't search for local movers with colorful trucks and friendly mascots. I searched for a logistics company that specialized in corporate relocations and high-value asset transport. I booked their white glove service for a dawn raid operation Tuesday morning, 600 hours. I paid the premium for a rush job and checked the box for non-disclosure. They would pack everything from the light bulbs to the teaspoons in 4 hours. I closed my laptop. The blue light faded, leaving me in the dark of my soon-to former home. I hadn't shed a single tear. I hadn't engaged in a single argument. I had simply executed a strategic pivot. They thought they had access to my life because they held a piece of brass metal. They didn't realize that by the time they tried to use it again, the lock it opened would belong to a ghost. I sat in the dark for a long time, the only light coming from the street lamps filtering through the blinds I hadn't closed. People often ask why it takes so long to leave a toxic dynamic. They assume it's weakness. It's not. It's investment. You convince yourself that if you just pay a little more, give a little more, eventually you will buy your freedom. You think you are building equity in the relationship, but tonight, staring at the empty space where my architectural model used to be, I realized the truth. I wasn't building equity. I was paying a tax on my own existence. For 5 years I had been the silent architect of their lifestyle. My parents didn't live in the city. They lived in a modest suburb, but they lived through me. I paid the annual dues for the Rainier Club not because I used it, but because my father insisted it was vital for family networking. I paid $4,000 for Vanessa's Influencer Academy course because my mother said it was an investment in the family brand. My apartment wasn't a home to them. It was a satellite office. It was a VIP lounge they had lifetime access to simply because they had birthed the owner. I thought about the face serum in the trash. $185. It was a trivial amount compared to the tuition or the club fees, but it was the symbol that finally broke the algorithm. Why didn't my mother ask? Why didn't she text me? Why did she feel comfortable digging through my bathroom cabinets, finding something precious to me and handing it to my sister like a party favor? The answer hit me with the force of a structural failure. It wasn't theft. In her mind, you cannot steal from yourself. There is a concept in psychology called the narcissistic extension. To a certain type of parent, a child is not a separate human being, with their own nervous system, desires, and property. The child is a limb, an extra arm, a third leg. If your arm itches, you don't ask it for permission to scratch it. You don't negotiate with your left foot about where it wants to step. You just move it. You just use it because it is you. To Angela and Gregory, I was not Olivia, the independent interior designer. I was the extension. My apartment was their extra room. My money was their rainy day fund. My face cream was their skincare. Boundaries didn't exist because you don't set boundaries with your own body parts. Attempting to set a boundary with them was like my hand trying to file a restraining order against my wrist. It didn't make sense to them. They viewed my autonomy as a malfunction. I remembered being 12 years old asking for a lock on my bedroom door. My father had removed the doorknob entirely the next day. "We have no secrets in this family," he had said, creating a hole in the wood where the privacy should have been. That hole had never really been filled. I had just moved it to a loft in Seattle and filled it with expensive furniture, hoping the distance would act as a lock. It hadn't. But tonight the limb was severing itself. The malfunction was becoming permanent. I wasn't doing this to teach them a lesson. You can't teach anatomy to a parasite. I was doing this to survive. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city that would soon hide me. I wasn't their retirement plan anymore. I wasn't their venue. I was a separate entity, and in 3 days I would be gone. The following week, the silence I expected didn't arrive. Instead, it was shattered by a single presumptuous phone call. I was reviewing sketches for a restaurant interior when my phone lit up. "Angela," the screen read. I hesitated, then answered, putting it on speaker as I continued to mark up the drawings. "Olivia, darling," my mother's voice chirped completely, bypassing any standard greeting or inquiry about my well-being. "I have wonderful news. The book club ladies were absolutely enchanted by the photos I showed them of your loft. Enchanted, so I've decided to host this month's Wine Wednesday at your place." I stopped writing. The pen hovered over the paper. "Excuse me." "Oh, don't worry about cleaning. I know you keep it tidy," she continued, steamrolling over my silence. "It's next Wednesday. We'll need the code for the building, of course, and maybe you could pick up some of those little artisan crackers you had last time. The rosemary ones, they were divine." She wasn't asking, she was informing. She was booking a venue. "Mom," I said, my voice dangerously calm, "I'm working next Wednesday. I can't host." "Oh, you don't need to be there." She laughed as if I had made a silly joke. "We I'll be fine on our own. Just leave the key under the mat or give it to Vanessa." Speaking of Vanessa, she says commuting from our house is killing her brand. She wants a key permanently so she can crash there after events. It makes sense, really. Of that extra space, my chest tightened. It wasn't just annoyance. It was a physical weight, like a stone being placed on my lungs. They didn't see my home. They saw a resource, a communal asset. They saw a convenient backdrop for their social climbing and a free hotel for my sister's vanity projects. "Mom," I said again. "No." "No." Her tone shifted instantly, sharpening into a weapon. "What do you mean, no? I already sent the invites." "Don't be selfish, Olivia. We do everything for you. Supported you when you were nothing. The least you can do is share your success. The least you can do," the phrase echoed in my head. It was the anthem of my life. The least I could do was pay. The least I could do was share. The least I could do was disappear so they could shine. "I have to go," I said, and hung up. My phone immediately buzzed again. A group chat notification. "Vanessa, Mom said you're being difficult about the key. Seriously, I need it by Monday. I have a collab with a skincare brand and your lighting is the only thing that works. Don't be a gatekeeper." I stared at the screen. The entitlement wasn't just a behavior anymore. It was the foundation of our entire relationship. They believed they owned me. They believed my no was just a malfunction in the service they were subscribed to. I didn't reply. I didn't argue. I looked around my loft. The high ceilings, the custom lighting, the carefully curated art. It didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like a stage I was paying the rent on while they directed the show. The internal feeling transition hit me then. The annoyance that usually simmered in my gut had cooled into something hard and heavy. It wasn't frustration anymore, it was finality. The decision I had made days ago wasn't just a reaction, it was a rescue mission. I picked up my pen and finished the markup on the sketch. Then I opened my calendar. Tuesday, 6:00 in the morning, moving day. I had 3 days left to endure the noise before the silence began. Tuesday morning arrived, not with sunshine but with the typical Seattle drizzle, grey and relentless. It matched my mood perfectly. The movers were punctual, their unmarked black truck pulling into the alley at exactly 600 hours. They worked in silence, wearing shoe covers and white gloves, packing my life into uniform boxes. I stood by the window, watching the transformation. My loft, which had been a curated exhibition of my taste and success, was being dismantled piece by piece. The M's chair, the custom rug, the marble lamps, all of it disappeared into cardboard and bubble wrap. With each box that was sealed, the space felt larger, colder, and strangely unfamiliar. It was shedding its skin. By 10:00, the apartment was empty, not just tidy but barren. The only thing left was the echo of my footsteps on the polished concrete floor. I did a final sweep, checking closets and cabinets, ensuring not a single hairpin or receipt remained. I was erasing myself from the narrative. As I walked toward the door, a wave of nausea hit me so hard I had to lean against the wall. It wasn't physical sickness. It was the phantom guilt of the survivor. There is a specific kind of pain reserved for the cycle breaker, the person who decides that the generational trauma stops with them. You feel like a traitor. You feel like you are abandoning soldiers on a battlefield even though those soldiers are the ones shooting at you. I thought about my parents. I thought about the wine Wednesday scheduled for tomorrow night. They would arrive expecting a venue, a free hotel, a daughter who existed to serve their needs. Instead, they would find this a void. Was I being cruel? Was I the villain in their story? The guilt whispered that I owed them, that their support when I was starting out, however conditional and weaponized, obligated me to endure their entitlement forever. But then I looked at the spot where my architectural model had been destroyed. I remembered the face serum in the trash. I remembered the demand for the key. They didn't want relationship, they wanted a resource. Staying wouldn't fix them, it would just consume me. I wasn't abandoning them. I was escaping a burning building. I took a deep breath, pushing the nausea down. I placed the dummy key on the kitchen island. It was a standard brass key I'd bought at a hardware store, cut to fit nothing. It looked heavy and important, just like their expectations, but it opened no doors. I walked out the heavy metal door, clicking shut with a finality that resonated in my bones. I didn't look back. I took the service elevator down to the garage, got into my car and drove out into the rain. The windshield wipers beat a steady rhythm like a metronome, counting down the hours until the discovery. I blocked their numbers on my phone, setting a temporary silence. The ghost protocol had begun. Settling into the fortress was a surreal experience. The silence was absolute. My new penthouse was sparse. Most of my furniture was in storage, but the emptiness felt intentional, not desolate. I slept on mattress on the floor for the first 3 nights, waking up only to the sound of rain against the reinforced glass, not the anxiety of an unexpected visitor. However, the digital tether hadn't been fully severed. I still had the management app for my old building on my phone to track the final utility bills. On Friday afternoon, 2 days after I moved out, a notification popped up. Security alert, permanent guest pass authorized for Unit 402. I frowned. I hadn't authorized anything. I opened the app, my thumb hovering over the screen. The log showed a request submitted 5 minutes ago. The name on the pass wasn't mine. It was Vanessa. My heart hammered. How I had the dummy key. I had the originals. I dug deeper into the app's access history. Scrolling back months, the logs revealed a pattern I hadn't noticed before because I was too busy working to fund their lifestyle. There were entries for key fob duplication service charged to my unit's account 3 months ago. They hadn't just been borrowing the spare key I kept in the kitchen drawer. My father, during one of his maintenance visits while I was at work, had taken the fob to a kiosk and made a permanent copy. He had given it to Vanessa. They had established their own independent access to my home without ever asking me. But the betrayal didn't stop there. As I scrolled through the building's community forum to see if anyone had reported issues, I saw a post from a neighbor complaining about short-term rental guests making noise. A sinking feeling hit me. I navigated to a popular vacation rental site and typed in my old address. There it was, modern minimalist loft in trendy district, weekend availability. The host profile was Angela, my mother. She had listed my apartment for $400 a night for the upcoming weekend, the same weekend as her wine Wednesday. The listing boasted about the curated art and chef's kitchen. She wasn't just using my home for social clout. She was monetizing it. She was selling access to my sanctuary to strangers to fund her own spending, banking on the fact that Olivia is always working anyway. I sat on the floor of my new empty living room, the glow of the phone illuminating my face. The nausea from moving day returned, but this time it was mixed with a cold, hard rage. They weren't just entitled, they were predatory. They had turned my life into a commodity. I took screenshots of everything. The access logs, the rental listing, the guest pass authorization. I didn't cancel the pass, I didn't report the listing. I simply logged out of the app. If they wanted to play landlord with a property they didn't own, let them face the tenants. Wednesday evening 7:00. I was sitting on my balcony in Pioneer Square wrapped in a cashmere throw, watching the rain blur the city lights. My phone, which had been silent for days, was now a digital war zone. I didn't answer. I just watched the notifications roll in like a ticker tape of their panic. It started with a text from Vanessa at 6:45 in the evening. Hey, the key isn't working. 10 minutes later, a missed call from my mother. Then another, then a text, Olivia, pick up. We have guests waiting in the lobby. This is embarrassing. I pictured the scene. My mother, dressed in her hosting best, standing in the sleek lobby of my old building, surrounded by her book club friends, holding a tray of artisan crackers. Vanessa furiously trying to jam the duplicate fob against the reader, her influencer smile faltering. They would try to buzz my unit. No answer. They would try the backup code. Invalid. At 7:15 the tone shifted. My father called, a voicemail. Olivia. Stopped playing games. Your mother is hysterical. We got the super to let us up because we told him there was a medical emergency. We're at your door. Open it. I took a sip of my tea. They had lied to get into the building. They had used a fake medical emergency to bypass security. It was the trellis all over again, just with a higher price tag. At 7:30 the climax hit, a voicemail from my mother. It wasn't the angry, entitled tone of a parent scolding a child. It was the primal, confused sound of someone whose reality had just shattered. Olivia, where are you? Where is everything? The apartment is empty. Did you get robbed? Oh God, did someone break in? Call me. Call the police. There's nothing here. I closed my eyes and let the words wash over me. There's nothing here. They weren't panicking because I was missing. They were panicking because their venue was missing. They were panicking because the stage they had sold tickets to had vanished. The guests were there expecting a show, expecting wine and art, and the vicarious thrill of my success. Instead, they were standing in a dark, empty concrete box with no furniture to sit on and no electricity to power the lights. At 8:00, a text from Vanessa, the Airbnb guests just showed up. They're screaming at Mom, what did you do? I didn't smile. I didn't feel triumph. I felt a deep, exhausting release. The cord had been cut. The parasite had been starved. They were standing in the wreckage of their own entitlement, finally facing the consequences of treating a person like a property. I picked up my phone and typed a single message. I sent it to the group chat. I am safe. I moved. I know about the duplicate key. I know about the rental listing. Do not look for me. Then I blocked them, all of them. I set the phone down and listened to the rain. It was the only sound in my fortress, and for the first time in my life it sounded like peace. It took 90 days for the digital siege to end. For the first week they tried everything. They called from burner phones. They sent emails with subject lines ranging from family emergency to we are going to call the police. They even had my aunt call me to ask if I was having a mental breakdown. I didn't answer a single one. I went back to my spreadsheet. I calculated the cost of my piece. The new rent, the movers, the deposit, it was expensive, yes, but when I balanced it against the cost of my sanity, I was finally in the black. 3 months later, I agreed to meet them. Not at my home, they would never see the inside of my home again, but at a busy coffee shop in downtown Seattle, 4 miles from my actual address. They looked smaller. Without the backdrop of my apartment to criticize, without my possessions to handle and judge, they seemed deflated. My mother tried to hug me, but I stepped back. We sat at a metal table bolted to the floor. Where are you living? My father asked, his voice tight. We don't even have an address for your birthday card. I live in Seattle, I said. That is all you need to know. If you want to send a card, you can email a gift certificate. My mother started to cry. We just want to know you're safe, Olivia. That's all we ever wanted. I looked at her, really looked at her, and finally understood the architecture of their control. For years, they had weaponized the concept of safety. They claimed they needed access to protect me from fires, from intruders, from starvation. They framed their surveillance as love, but sitting there watching them struggle to manipulate a woman they could no longer reach, I realized the profound irony. They claimed they wanted to protect me from the world, but they were the danger I needed protection from. They were the intruders. They were the ones looting my emotional resources by destroying my privacy in the name of safety. They had forced me to build a fortress to keep them out. I didn't say any of this. I didn't need to explain it to them. You don't explain the lock to the thief. I am safe, I said, standing up. I have never been safer. I left them there with their lukewarm coffee and their confusion. I drove back to the Pioneer Square penthouse. I parked in the secure garage. I took the private elevator to the top floor. I placed my hand on the biometric scanner and the heavy door slid open with a silent hydraulic hiss. I walked inside. The space was stark, clean, and empty of anyone else's expectations. There were no throw pillows moved. No face creams missing, no wine rings on the counter, just the hum of the HVAC system and the sound of the city below. I poured a glass of water and walked out onto the balcony. The rain had stopped. The city lights were reflecting off the wet pavement, glittering like diamonds. I took a sip. It tasted cold. It tasted like ownership. It tasted like peace. If you've ever had to build a fortress to protect your peace from the people who were supposed to be your safe haven, share this story. You are not alone. If you enjoyed this story, hit like, and do subscribe if you want story more like this.